is issuing a desperate plea to the government, humanitarian organizations, international actors, and citizens across the nation. Step in now, before it's too late. For more information on how you can help, contact Professor Usman A. Tar, the Honorable Commissioner for Information and Internal Security, Borno State, on 0809-233-3955. Every second counts.
This is powered by Atlantic Television Network.
The people of Maiduguri need your help.
In details, we delve into Africa. 3 men in Benin, including a former minister and a man in charge of President Patrice Talon's security, have been arrested on suspicion of plotting a coup, the state prosecutor has said. Ex-Sport Minister Oswald Homke was caught on Tuesday while handing over 6 bags of money to the head of the Republican Guard, Elon Mario Metono. The prosecutor told a press conference. Investigators said Colonel Jimon Diodon was being bribed not to resist a coup d'etat plan for Friday in a small West African nation. Also detained was a businessman, Olivia Boko, a friend of President Talon, who had recently indicated they had political ambitions. Mr. Boko's lawyers and supporters condemned what they call his abduction and have demanded his immediate release. Investigations are ongoing to identify further suspects, the prosecutor said. Benin, once praised as a multi-party democracy, has taken a more autocratic turn under the presidency of Patrice Talon, rights groups says. President Talon announced he would not seek a third term in office in the 2026 elections. There have been 8 military takeovers and several other coup attempts in West and Central Africa since 2020. A Ghanaian activist arrested for organizing a protest against illegal mining has been taken to the hospital for urgent medical care. His legal team claims he was not given timely medical attention, but Ghana's police denied this. Illegal gold mining, known as galamsey, pollutes over 60% of Ghana's water bodies. The activist, educated at the UK's renowned Cambridge University, was arrested over the weekend along with more than 40 others after they clashed with the police. He was scheduled to appear in court on Wednesday. Some protesters have said that they have been denied food and water since they were detained on Saturday. The police have not commented on this. Mr. Vomawo also helped organize a similar demonstration under the hashtag Fix the Country to protest the cost of living crisis last year. Ghana's courts remanded 39 protesters in police custody, with 11 remaining in prison for 2 weeks. Lawyers also filed a petition against the police for infringing on their rights. Many Ghanaians condemned their arrest and demanded their immediate release using the hashtag Free the Citizens. Ghana's President Nana Akufo-Addo has ordered the deployment of police and military to crack down on illegal miners, a move that has been criticized as reminiscent of military rule. The issue has forced the country's water company to shut down treatment plants and ration water in southern Ghana. An analyst predicts that the country could be importing water by 2030 if not addressed. An investigation found that illegal miners often operate at night. The remains of 42 South African freedom fighters that died while exiled in Zimbabwe and Zambia during the struggle against white minority rule arrived in their home country on Wednesday. The remains were received by government officials and family members at Waterkloof Air Force Base in the capital, Pretoria, after being exhumed for reburial in the country of their birth, as this was part of a government program to bring closure to families whose loved ones died away from home while serving in the underground structures of both the African National Congress and Pan-Africanist Congress, according to officials. Before the 1994 apartheid system ended in South Africa, activists left the country for military training and armed struggle. Some chose Zimbabwe and Zambia for their strong underground structures. After South African banned the party, Nelson Mandela's African National Congress moved its headquarters to Lusaka. Many died in exile and were buried in those countries. Among the remains returned to South Africa were those of freedom struggle stalwarts Duma Nkowe, Florence Mofosho, and Basil February. Deputy President Paul Mashatile stated that the repatriation is part of a national memory project to educate future generations about the struggle against apartheid and preserve South Africa's legacy. President Cyril Ramaphosa is expected to host a homecoming ceremony for the repatriated remains on Friday before they are handed over to families for reburials. However, the government said on Wednesday that it was in the process of repatriating the remains of other South Africans from Lesotho, Ethiopia, Tanzania, Angola, Russia, and other countries. Senegal's government said it will on Thursday deliver its promised review of the hard-pressed country's financial situation 6 months after sweeping to power, pledging radical change. President Bassirou Diomaye Faye and Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko, who were sworn in March, have requested Sonko to conduct a comprehensive review of the West African country's financial situation. The government will share the results of the stock take on Thursday, aiming to discuss identified shortcomings and propose measures to mitigate an inherited situation. The government dissolved the National Assembly in mid-September to implement its policy agenda, citing a serious deterioration in public finances. The International Monetary Fund warned that Senegal's economic prospects would remain challenging for the remainder of the year, as the opposition-dominated parliament had previously hindered government action. The IMF has warned that the West African nation's budgetary situation is expected to worsen due to lower revenue collections and increased energy subsidies and interest payments. The IMF has urged the government to implement measures to reduce public debt, including streamlining tax exemptions and phasing out costly energy subsidies. The unemployment rate in Senegal rose by 3% in second quarter. ATN gathered that Senegal's government is reviewing its baseline situation to establish a strategy rather than outlining a strategy. The review is part of the drafting of a new economic conference framework titled Senegal 2050 National Agenda for Transformation. The plan aims to transform the Senegalese economy and build a prosperous nation. The plan will be officially launched on October 7. A national development strategy for 2025-2029 outlines a new economic model less reliant on foreign aid, aiming for an average 6.5% growth and debt control. Sudan's army launched artillery and airstrikes in Sudan's capital on Thursday in its biggest operation to regain ground there since early in its 17-month war with the Rapid Support Forces, witnesses and military sources said. The push by the army, which lost control of most of the capital at the start of the conflict, came ahead of an address by its commander, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, at the United Nations General Assembly in New York later in the day. Witnesses reported heavy bombardments and clashes as army troops tried to cross bridges across the Nile connecting the three adjoining cities that make up the greater capital, Khartoum, Omdurman, and Bari. Though the army retook some ground in Omdurman early this year, it depends mostly on artillery and airstrikes and has been unable to dislodge more effective RSF ground forces embedded in other parts of the capital. The RSF has also continued to make advances in other parts of Sudan in recent months in a conflict that has caused a vast humanitarian crisis, displacing more than 10 million people and driving parts of the country to extreme hunger or famine. Diplomatic efforts by the United States and other powers have faltered, with the army refusing to attend talks last month in Switzerland. allies, including the U.S. and Hezbollah. The 12-strong bloc of nations has proposed a 21-day pause in fighting and a ceasefire in Gaza, stating the hostilities are intolerable and pose an unacceptable risk of regional escalation. The move follows Israel's military chief's warning that extensive airstrikes in Lebanon could lead to a ground invasion into Lebanon. The statement was signed following a UN General Assembly meeting. U.S. President Biden and French President Macron have called for a temporary ceasefire in the ongoing conflict in Syria, aiming to ensure safety and security for civilians. The proposal is a sustained phase that allows for further negotiations to reach a complicated agreement. The U.S. is negotiating with Lebanon's government, not Hezbollah, and it will be the Lebanese government's responsibility to engage with non-state actors. Official responses are expected within hours. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for an immediate ceasefire in the Middle East, stating hell is breaking loose. Lebanon's Prime Minister Najib Mikati expressed concern over Israel's brutal practices and hopes for a serious solution to pressure Israel for a ceasefire. Israel's envoy to the UN, Danny Danon, stated that it will use all means to achieve its aims. Over 600 people have been killed in Lebanon since Israel began an air campaign to destroy Hezbollah's infrastructure since 2006. Over 90,000 people have been displaced, with nearly 40,000 living in shelters. Cross-border fighting sparked by the war in Gaza has displaced around 70,000 people in northern Israel. Hezbollah claims it is attacking Israel in support of its Palestinian ally, Hamas, and will not stop until a ceasefire in Gaza. Hezbollah fired dozens of rockets into northern Israel, injuring 2. The strikes have killed at least 51 people and injured 223 without specifying how many civilians or combatants were. New York City Mayor Eric Adams is facing federal criminal charges, according to news report. Adams, 64 years old, was elected to lead the most populous U.S. city nearly 3 years ago on a promise to rein in crime. But he and a string of top officials in his orbit have faced growing scrutiny as part of multiple federal corruption probes, according to report. The indictment remains sealed but would make Adams, 64 years old, the first mayor in city history to be charged with while in office. Adams released a video statement late on Wednesday where he vowed to fight the charges and remain in office, asking New York residents for both prayers and patience. He says he will fight this injustice with every ounce of his strength and his spirit. He also says in the video, adding that he is innocent and he plans to request an immediate trial so New Yorkers can hear the truth. He also took on a flurry of calls for him to resign. Federal prosecutors are expected to unseal the indictment on Thursday when Adams will make an initial court appearance. Newsman reports. The reported charges come less than a year after federal agents seized Adams' electronic devices and searched the home of Brianna Sachs, his chief fundraiser. It was later revealed that the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan was looking into whether Adams' 2021 mayoral campaign team conspired with the government of Turkey to funnel illegal donations into the campaign. Prosecutors have subpoenaed the campaign and mayor's office for information related to 5 other countries: Israel, China, Qatar, South Korea, and Uzbekistan. Mayor Adams has remained in office despite a growing list of officials calling for his resignation. The indictment comes after federal agents seized electronic devices belonging to 3 closely affiliated people, including schools, Chancellor David Banks, Deputy Mayor Phil Banks, and his fiancée, Deputy Mayor Sheena Wright. Prosecutors are also investigating bribery claims against the twin brother of former New York Police Commissioner Edward Caban. Adams faces a growing list of Democratic challenges ahead of his re-election bid next year. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris pledged to boost domestic manufacturing investments if elected to the White House in November. In a speech in Pennsylvania, Harris portrayed herself as a capitalist with a pragmatic approach to boosting the middle class. Republican rival Donald Trump also emphasized his economic agenda. Harris proposes $100 billion in tax breaks and incentives for young families, first-time home buyers, and the elderly, with investment in AI, aerospace, and energy. She also calls for increased tax rates for corporations and the wealthiest Americans. Harris aims to grow America's middle class, contrasting Trump's focus on personal gain. In her first solo interview with MSNBC, Harris criticized Trump for his lack of seriousness on tariff proposals and his constant play with China. She also defended her claim that she is lying about working at McDonald's as a university student, aiming to challenge Trump's economic handling advantage with voters. The race between Donald Trump and Harris is still close, but Harris has a narrow lead in national polling. Trump defended his tariff proposals, claiming they caused people in other countries to want to kill her. President Trump has emphasized his history of passing the largest corporate tax cut in U.S. history and plans to focus on a manufacturing renaissance with a 15% tax rate for American-made products. Both candidates have endorsed populist policies, with Harris comparing Trump's proposal to ending taxation on service workers' tips to Trump's tax cuts for billionaires and top corporations. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has survived a motion in Parliament aimed at bringing down his government and triggering an election. Wednesday's no-confidence vote is the first in a series of similar votes expected to be put forward by the opposition Conservative Party amid Trudeau's plummeting approval ratings. The motion failed after opposition leader Pierre Poilievre fell short in his effort to shore up support from leaders of two other political parties in Parliament. The New Democratic Party and the Bloc Québécois, Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, has been facing growing pressure to step down due to a plummet in his approval rating, which has dropped from 63% to 28% in June, amid concerns about housing unaffordability and rising living costs. The Conservative Party plans to bring at least two more no-confidence votes on Thursday. Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau faced a no-confidence vote after the Liberal Party's coalition with the NDP collapsed in September. The Conservative Party, led by Pierre Poilievre, proposed a vote which required approval of the majority of Parliament. The Liberal Party voted against it, while the Conservative Party voted in favor. The motion was defeated by 211 votes. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau plans to bring the promise of a powerful paycheck to Canada, aiming to provide affordable food, gas, and homes. However, NDP leader Singh will vote against Poilievre's motion due to concerns about the Conservative Party cutting social programs. The Bloc Québécois hopes to work with the Liberal government to secure Quebec-focused social programs. U.S. lawmakers took the first step on Wednesday to avoid a government shutdown as the House of Representatives approved a stopgap funding deal that will keep the lights on through the U.S. election. The agreement, which is due to rubber stamped by the Senate within hours, came ahead of a September 30 deadline to either approve a new government budget or begin shutting down federal agencies just 5 weeks ahead of Election Day. The Senate has approved a bipartisan agreement to keep the government operational at current spending levels until December 20th. The measure, which was advanced by the Republican-led House after minority Democrats made up for no votes from conservative rebels, aims to prevent vital government services from needlessly halting. Although there was less of the drama that usually attends funding fights, a shutdown did at one stage look like a distinct possibility, worrying the Republicans who control the House as they seek re-election on November 5th. The stopgap continuing resolution was required because neither chamber had been able to agree on the various departmental budgets for the full 2025 fiscal year starting October 1st. Last week, hardliners pushed for a bill that would have extended funding through March next year, paired with the SAFE Act, which would add proof of citizenship requirements to voter registration. Donald Trump, a Republican presidential candidate, has been lobbying for House Speaker Mike Johnson to add an election measure to the SAFE Act, according to reports. However, the plan was scrapped due to lack of support from Republicans and the inability to rely on Democratic votes. President Biden's administration opposed the SAFE Act, citing illegal non-citizen voting. The House passed a non-bipartisan bill approving over $230 million for the Secret Service to increase protection for Trump and other campaign candidates. Former U.S. President Donald Trump on Wednesday accused Ukraine's leader Volodymyr Zelensky of refusing to make a deal to end his country's war with Russia. Trump criticizes Ukrainian President Zelensky for refusing to make deals, stating that billions of dollars are given to him. Trump criticizes Zelensky as a great salesman and that the country is obliterated. A face-to-face meeting between Trump, who has been highly critical of the aid Washington and the Pentagon have disbursed to Kyiv, and Zelensky have been floated for the sideline of the ongoing United Nations General Assembly in New York. But the meeting is expected to be scrapped, according to U.S. media, which reported Trump did not appreciate the interview Zelensky gave to the New Yorker magazine, in which the Ukrainian president said he believed the 78-year-old Republican doesn't really know how to stop the war. Trump has reportedly cancelled a meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky following his accusation of Russia plotting attacks on Ukrainian nuclear plants. Trump has claimed a guaranteed plan to end the war, but would not reveal it until he wins the U.S. presidential election. You're watching the international news on Atlantic Television Network. We'll be back after this break. Please do stay with us.
The people of Maiduguri need your help. A catastrophic flood has engulfed the city, leaving over 1 million residents stranded and fighting for survival. Entire communities are submerged, with people trapped inside homes and on rooftops cut off from food, clean drinking water and essential supplies. Health experts are warning of a potential outbreak of deadly diseases, and medical facilities are out of commission. The situation is dire. Helicopters, boats and high-riding trucks capable of navigating the treacherous, waterlogged areas are urgently required to reach the countless men, women and children still awaiting rescue. The Nigerian media is issuing a desperate plea to the government, humanitarian organizations, international actors and citizens across the nation. Step in now, before it's too late. For more information on how you can help, contact Professor Usman A. Tar, the Honorable Commissioner for Information and Internal Security, Borno State, on 0809 233 3955. Every second counts.
This is powered by Atlantic Television Network.
Many thanks for staying right there with us. This is the international news on Atlantic Television Network. We are open for adverts placements, bookings, and commercials. And you can connect with us and watch us on ATN Socials, Facebook and YouTube, Atlantic Television Network. Instagram and TikTok at Atlantic TV Network 1, X formerly Twitter at Atlantic TV Net, which is live on our website at atlanticnetwork.tv. And now to the rest of our stories. 6 inmates died after a fire ripped through their cell in a prison on the outskirts of Uruguay's capital, Montevideo. The Interior Ministry said on Wednesday. The cause of the blaze at Santiago Vasquez Penitentiary, the biggest prison in the Latin American country, was unknown. Uruguay has the highest incarceration rate in Latin America and the 10th highest in the world, according to state figures. 4 out of 9 baths in 2023, a record level according to a recent report by the Parliamentary Prisons Commissioner. The Prisons Commissioner had warned of poor conditions at Santiago Vasquez Penitentiary, saying a lack of opportunities of rehabilitation and integration was leading to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment of the prisoners. A Secret Service agent is under investigation for an alleged sexual misconduct incident and an aide to Vice President Kamala Harris, her office said on Wednesday. The agency confirmed to newsmen that there was a probe but did not provide details of the investigation. The Secret Service holds its personnel to the highest standards. The employee has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome. A spokesperson for the Vice President's office also didn't disclose further details of the incident. The spokesperson said in a statement that they have zero tolerance for sexual misconduct. Senior OVP officials were alerted by the USSS about an incident involving an agent and informed that USSS initiated an investigation. Japanese court has acquitted an 88-year-old Iwa Hakamada, the world's longest-serving death row inmate, after determining that evidence against him was fabricated. Hakamada was found guilty in 1968 of killing his boss, wife, and children. His mental health has been a significant factor in his case. Hakamada's case is one of Japan's longest and most famous legal sagas and has attracted widespread public interest, with some 500 people lining up for seats in a courtroom in Shizuoka on Thursday. Former boxer Hakamada has been acquitted of murdering his employer, wife, and 2 children in a 1966 fire at a miso processing plant in Suzoku, Tokyo. Authorities accused him of setting fire to their home and stealing 200,000 yen in cash. Hakamada, who was exempted from hearings due to his deteriorating mental state, has been living with his sister, Hideko, since 2014. Hakamada, a notorious serial killer, initially denied robbery and murder, but later confessed after brutal interrogations. He was convicted in 1968 of murder and arson. The case was reopened after clothes found in miso were used to incriminate him. However, Hakamada's lawyer argued that the DNA from the clothes did not match his, suggesting he could have been fabricated. Hakamada, a Japanese death row inmate, was released from jail and granted a retrial. The retrial, which began last year, found that the red stains on his clothes were not blood, as blood will not remain red on clothing immersed in miso for a year. The courts declared Hakamada innocent. His mental health has been affected by decades of detention and the threat of execution. Retrials for death row inmates are rare in Japan. A video shows a two-story building collapsing into the overflowing Ganges River in the northern Indian state of Bihar. No one was injured in the incident, according to reports, which occurred earlier this week in Bhagalpur district, newsmen reported. At least 10 people have died in Bihar after heavy rainfall caused flooding in several parts of the state. Relief and rescue teams have been deployed to the affected areas. A Hong Kong court is set to sentence 2 journalists on Thursday in a landmark sedition case that is widely seen as an indicator of media freedom in a city once known as a beacon of press freedom in Asia. Former editor-in-chief Chung Pew-Kyun and Patrick Lam have been convicted of sedition under a colonial-era law in Hong Kong. The news outlet, which criticized authorities during pro-democracy protests in 2019, was one of the last in Hong Kong to do so. They face up to 2 years in prison and a fine of 5,000 Hong Kong dollars. Judge Kwok Wai King ruled that Stan News was used to incite hatred against the Beijing and Hong Kong governments during the 2019 protests. He ruled that 11 articles published under the leadership of activist Nathan Law and veteran journalist Alan Au and Chan Pew-man carried seditious intent. Chan, who is also Chung's wife, pleaded guilty in the Apple Daily case. Thousands of residents are in line to secure a seat in the courtroom. Their trial, which began in October 2022, lasted some 50 days. The verdict was postponed several times for reasons including a wait for an appeal outcome in another landmark sedition case. The lawyer Audrey Yu argued for the pair to be sentenced to up to time served, saying their case was different because they were journalists whose responsibility was to report on the city's situation and different people's views. The pair also stressed their journalistic mission in their mitigation letters. Hong Kong's press freedom has been severely impacted by a rare disease diagnosis and chemotherapy, with Lam and Chung detained for nearly a year. The city's ranking in Reporters Without Borders World Press Freedom Index has dropped from 80 in 2021 to 18 in 2002, and increased self-censorship has led to increased harassment against journalists. South Korea announced plans on Thursday to compensate farmers and others in the country's dwindling dark meat industry before a formal ban goes into effect in 2027, a move that is drawing opposition from both farmers and animals rights activists. South Korea's parliament passed a landmark bill in January that will ban slaughtering, breeding, or selling dog meat for human consumption after a 3-year grace period. It will be punishable by 2 to 3 years in prison. The Agriculture Ministry said that farmers would receive compensation starting from 225,000 won and rising up to 600,000 won, that is $450 per dog, if they agree to shut down their business early. South Korea's ban on dog meat production is likely to be rejected by farmers who argue it infringes on their job rights and worsens their economic struggles. An association of dog farmers has called for an extension of the grace period and compensation plans. Humane Society International criticized the plan for potentially increasing dog breeding and causing suffering. South Korea's dog meat industry, a cultural and economic powerhouse, has gained attention due to its industrial-scale dog farms. First Lady Kim Kyun-hee supports the prohibition, but surveys shows around 1 in 3 South Koreans oppose it. Most people now don't eat dog meat. Vice Agricultural Minister Park Byung-soo told reporters that government studies found that about 466,000 dogs are currently being raised for foods across South Korea. He said officials will try to convince farmers to voluntarily phase out dog breeding ahead of the ban. The government plans to adopt remaining docks, compensate butchers, dismantle dock farms, offer low-interest loans for former farmers and butchers, and provide financial assistance to traders and restaurant owners to find new job post-ban. A strike by more than 1,000 workers at a Samsung Indian electronics plant has entered its third week, and management is at an impasse over their demands for recognition of the employees' union and higher pay, a workers' union spokesman said on Wednesday. Gopi Kumar, the spokesman for the Samsung India Electronics Workers Union, said the employees' strike in the plants near Chennai, the capital of the southern state of Tamil Nadu, started on September 9 with a key demand for a 25 to 30% pay hike in the average monthly salary of 30,000 to 35,000 rupees, adding that their farmers' demand is recognition of the union and its rights by the management. A Samsung official said that management was prepared to discuss the workers' demands. The official, who spoke on condition of anonymity because he wasn't authorized to talk to reporters, said the company wanted to negotiate directly with the employees' representatives rather than through the Center of Indian Trade Unions, or CITU. The C2 is an Indian trade union aligned with the Communist Party. Samsung said that it paid 1.8 times more in India than the average salary of similar workers employed at other regional companies. The workers' union says that up to 70% of reproduction has been disrupted at the Sri Perumbodur facility in southern India, which produces televisions, refrigerators, and washing machines. However, the Samsung official said that after an initial disruption of 50% production, the plant was running at near average capacity with non-striking workers, apprentices, and newly hired staff on the job. The electronics company appealed to striking workers to resume their jobs. In a communication with the workers, Samsung assured them that it wouldn't take action against those employees who wished to resume work, but warned them of termination if they continued with the protest, news agency reported. Ukraine's air defenses battled an overnight Russian aerial attack on the capital Kyiv for 5 hours, officials said on Thursday, as missiles and drones again hammered the Ukrainian power grid. The Kyiv attack injured at least 2 people, Ukraine's emergency service said. A kindergarten, a gas pipe, and around 20 cars were damaged in the city, said the Kyiv military administration. Long-range strikes have been a hallmark of Russia's military campaign in Ukraine, now deep in its third year, often hitting civilian areas. Attacks on the electricity network have knocked out around 70% of Ukraine's energy generation capacity, according to the United Nations, bringing blackouts as winter approaches. Air defense systems are a critical need for Ukraine, and President Volodymyr Zelensky was due to meet President Joe Biden in Washington on Thursday in an effort to ensure continuing U.S. military support for his country. Energy infrastructure was hit in Ukraine's western Ivano-Frankivsk region, causing a blackout in parts of the regional capital of the same name. Regional Governor Onyshuk said. The power grid was also targeted in the southern Mykolaiv region, local authorities said, without immediately providing further details. Russia launched 6 missiles and 78 Shahid drones at Ukraine overnight from Wednesday to Thursday. Ukraine's efforts said. Defenses destroyed 4 of the missiles and 66 drones in the air, it said. In the south, a missile killed a 62-year-old woman in the Odessa region, where homes and cars were damaged. Regional Governor Ole Kipa said. In the city of Zaporizhia, at least 8 people were injured in the overnight attack, including a 14-year-old, said Regional Governor Ivan Fedorov. He published photographs of houses with the windows blown out and walls riddled with shrapnel. The emergency service said 12 residential buildings were damaged in the city and 18 people were evacuated. UK transport officials and police said on Thursday that they are investigating a cybersecurity incident that hit the public Wi-Fi networks at the country's biggest railway stations. Passengers trying to log on to the Wi-Fi at stations including Manchester Piccadilly, Birmingham, New Street and 11 London terminuses on Wednesday evening were met by a page reading, "We love you, Europe," followed by an anti-Islam message listing a series of terror attacks. Network Rail, which manages the station, said the Wi-Fi had been switched off and no passengers' data was taken. British Transport Police are investigating the incident, Network Rail said in a statement. This service is provided via a third party and has been suspended while an investigation is underway. The incident follows a more disruptive cyber attack in early September on Transport for London, which runs the capital's bus, subway and suburban train system. Some customer names, contact details and potentially bank accounts details were exposed in the attack, which is being investigated by the National Crime Agency. A 17-year-old was arrested over the attack, questioned and bailed without being charged. Weeks on, the attack continues to affect the transit company's ability to provide some online services such as refunds and real-time transit information. Vladimir Putin says Russia would consider an attack from a non-nuclear state that was backed by a nuclear-armed one to be a joint attack in what could be construed as a threat to use nuclear weapons in the war in Ukraine. In key remarks on Wednesday night, the Russian president said his government was considering changing the rules and preconditions around which Russia would use its nuclear arsenal. Ukraine is a non-nuclear state that receives military support from the U.S. and other nuclear-armed countries. His comments come as Kyiv seeks approval to use long-range Western missiles against military sites in Russia. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has traveled to the U.S. this week and is due to meet with U.S. President Joe Biden in Washington on Thursday, where Kyiv's request is expected to be top of their agenda. Ukraine has pushed into Russian territory this year and wants to target bases inside Russia, which it says are sending missiles into Ukraine. Responding to Putin's remarks, Zelensky's chief of staff, Andriy Yermak, said Russia no longer has anything other than nuclear blackmail to intimidate the world. Putin has threatened the use of nuclear weapons before. Ukraine has criticized it as nuclear saber-rattling to deter its allies from providing further support. Russian ally China has also called for calm, with reports President Xi Jinping has warned Putin against using nuclear arms. But on Wednesday, after a meeting with his Security Council, Putin announced the proposed radical expansion. Pope Francis has arrived in Luxembourg on Thursday for a brief day visit to one of Europe's smallest countries ahead of a weekend trip to Belgium, where he will highlight the needs of migrants and meet with a group of survivors of abuse by Catholic clergy. The Thursday to Sunday Luxembourg and Belgium tour is a rare European visit for Francis, who prefers going to places never visited by a pope or where Catholics are a small minority. It comes less than 2 weeks after Francis returned from a demanding 12-day, four-country tour across Southeast Asia and Oceania. The 87-year-old pontiff landed at Luxembourg's Findel International Airport on a chartered ITA Airways flight, also carrying his entourage and accompanying reporters. The Pope will spend the day in the country before heading on in the evening to Brussels, the Belgian capital. Belgium's ambassador to the Vatican, Patrick Renault, said Francis was expected to meet a group of 15 abuse survivors there privately. Belgium, like many countries, has uncovered cases of clerical sexual abuse. In March, the Pope expelled from the priesthood a former Belgian bishop who admitted to sexually abusing 2 nephews. More than 700 complaints and reports of abuse involving the church have been made in Belgium since 2012, according to a church report. On Thursday, Francis will hold private meetings with Luxembourg's Grand Duke Henry, the monarch, and Prime Minister Luc Frieden before giving a speech to the country's political authorities. He will also hold a meeting with local Catholics at Luxembourg City's Notre Dame Cathedral. On Friday morning, Francis is due to meet Belgium's King Philippe and Prime Minister Alexander De Croo and then give a speech. On a flight from Rome on Thursday morning, Francis briefly greeted the journalists traveling on a plane with him, but did not tour the aircraft to meet them individually, as he usually does. The Pope, who has difficulty walking due to knee and back pain, said he did not feel up to making the trip around the back of the single-aisle aircraft. Luxembourg, a country with an area of 2,586 square kilometers, counts about 271,000 Catholics among its 654,000 population, the Vatican says. And that's it on the international news for today. Before we go, another look at the major stories. Well, we told you that Benin men suspected of a coup plot were arrested. Remains of South African freedom fighters arrived home. We also told you that U.S. and allies call for 21-day ceasefire across Lebanon-Israel border. Don't forget that we also told you that New York City Mayor Eric Adams indicted on federal charges. 6 inmates reported dead in Uruguay's prison fire. We also told you that world's longest-serving death row inmate acquitted in Japan. Thank you so much for watching. I am Victor Peter. And you can follow us on our social media platforms on X, formerly Twitter, at Atlantic TV Net, Facebook and YouTube at Atlantic Television Network, Instagram at Atlantic TV Network. Watch us live on our website, atlanticnetwork.tv. Peace and unity are the pathways to progress. Business.
The people of Maiduguri need your help. A catastrophic flood has engulfed the city, leaving over 1 million residents stranded and fighting for survival. Entire communities are submerged, with people trapped inside homes and on rooftops cut off